Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Reading Through the Decades with myself, Jackie, the Adult Services Librarian at Noble North Syracuse, and Terry, who is one of our adult librarians at Noble Cicero. And this is our last time talking to you guys for Reading Through the Decades. Terry's going to be covering the 90s. I will be covering the 2000s, and we're going to have some interesting discussions about culture and an unknown author from our own neck of the woods. So if you're interested, stay tuned.
All right. So this month, I was reading the 90s. So I decided to read Paul Watkins, which you can't see because it's backwards. Unless
I can see it. We're good,
Oh,
actually.
excellent. Okay,
it's just very shiny.
Like yeah, all right. The Story of My Disappearance. So I want to talk not only about the book, which I'll do briefly, but then I want to talk about him as well. The Story of My Disappearance starts somewhere on the East Coast in the Northeast. I don't remember if it was Maine or Massachusetts, but a couple, a boy and a girl, a male and a female couple, are fisher persons. And they are eating lunch in a dive bar, a dank dive bar in the tourist town in which they live. So the tourists never go to this bar because it's not a tourist bar. And all of a sudden, a complete stranger walks in, sits down, orders some food, is eating. A second stranger comes in, sits down with the first one, they're chatting, and then the second stranger kills the first one right there in front of everybody. There's like 4 people in the bar at the time. And then gets up and walks out.
Okay, then.
First chapter. And the second chapter, and no, I'm not going to do a chapter by chapter breakdown, but the second chapter is the guy in the couple's story. He's a Russian spy. So is she. They're Russian spies posing as fisher people.
Okay.
And then it goes back to his time in Afghanistan, and it goes back to when they would regularly have to go out into the ocean and meet a Russian sub and pick up the same guy who would bring diamonds from Russia to America and sell them in New York in the Diamond District for American dollars. That's what he did. And so then they had to bring him back out. And so that's the story. And it's kind of interesting. They get caught in a big storm and their ship sinks and that diamond smuggler dies, and a lot of really interesting things. The book is actually, it's kind of a cheat. It's not a big novel, as you can see.
Mine too.
It's more of a novella. It really is only 184 pages long.
Okay.
Oh, I lied. It's 188 pages. It was published in 97, I believe. Yeah, 97. It was published after the fall of the Berlin Wall because he makes reference to it. But I want to talk more about Paul Watkins, who actually graduated from Syracuse University's MFA project or school. So when I decided to write this or read about this one, I immediately emailed George Saunders and asked him if any of the professors who taught in the school now may remember Paul and if they were around then. And his response was, I know Paul.
Oh, cool.
Him. He's handsome. And he is a good looking guy. But no, none of the professors were around. But Paul Watkins, for me, is one of those writers that I don't understand why he's not on the bestseller list. I don't understand why everybody doesn't know his name. He's easily understandable. He's not a complex where there's, enigmas and all this kind of BS. It's really well written. he wrote his first novel when he was 16. It didn't get published until 8 years later, but he wrote it when he was 16.
That's impressive.
Yeah, and he published 3 novels the 3 years out of his Syracuse University program.
Wow.
Boom, 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 one right after another. So that leads me to believe that he actually wrote them between the time he was 16 and when he was going to school here. The interesting thing about him is he's an American, but his parents are from Wales, and they moved to America. And then when he was 6, his father sent him to boarding school in England.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
Went to the Dragon School. Yeah, he was educated at the Dragon School, and then he went to Eton, and then he came here for college and went to Yale.
And then Syracuse.
Yeah, and then Syracuse for his MFA. He is a English teacher at a private school in New England somewhere called the Piddle School. It's a dumb name, but Peddle, whatever.
Whoa.
And I really just don't get why he isn't better known. His first book, again, that he wrote when he was 16 was Calm at Sunset, Calm at Dawn, I believe. Nope, I lied. That's his second book. His first book was Night Over Day Over Night. I had asked George Saunders, I said George, because I'm name dropping now. This is the name dropping portion.
Boom.
Why do you think Paul's not better known? And he said, I really don't know. My guess is that he published too soon out of school, and his first 3 books were historical fiction, which in the early 90s were not a big seller back then, no matter how good they were.
What imprint does he publish under?
In England, it's Faber and Faber, and in America, I think it's Random House.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That's not bad.
It's a big house. Yeah, they're big houses, definitely. They're not like small, obscure things. The other thing he does is he writes under a pseudonym. He writes thrillers that take place when Tsarist Russia falls and the communists take over.
Oh.
Yeah, I want to say Sam Tannenhouse, but that's not right. Sam Eastland, I think is his name, that he writes under. And I read one of those too, and it was really good. I read the first one in the series, which is basically he's hired by the communists to find any surviving member of the Tsar's family that may have survived being killed.
Anastasia.
Yeah, Anastasia, and also the son was supposedly.
Yep. The hemophiliac, right?
Yes.
Okay.
But in the book, as well as in real life, they found his bones in the bottom of a well somewhere in obscure Russiaville. So he's dead. There are no real survivors left.
Except Anastasia.
There might be cousins. But so he's really, and he also wrote a memoir about his time at the Dragon School and at Eton called Stand Before Your God. It's weird. He's American, but from the age of 6 on, he was in England, so he kind of speaks with a cross between an American and a British accent. It's really kind of funny.
Interesting.
But yeah, he's just one of those people that I don't understand why they're not better known, because they're such a good writer.
I do, yeah. I mean, I've never heard of him, and the fact that he went to SU and his books sound like something I would definitely enjoy reading. I'm going to have to look into it.
The other one of his I read is called Iceland, and it's about 2 explorers that go up the Himalayas and mountains and that kind of stuff.
Oh, that's definitely my jam.
Come across Nazis.
Oh, yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
I'm down. Yeah. I'm going to look that up. Add it to my Goodreads right now.
Yeah, it's really good. But yeah, that's kind of it. I mean, oh, wait. There is one thing I wanted to share. Where did it go? You know, they talk about what's the book about? What's the book really about?
Mm-hmm.
And the book, I came across it in this page in here, and I said, oh, that's what this book is really about. So our hero, who is a Russian spy, and he came over, and he where'd it go? All right, I don't know where it is, but I can tell you what it said. Basically, this guy, our hero, was just sitting around in Russia, living his life, and he was brought in by the KGB, and they said, "Listen, your friend Ingo, I-N-G-O, Ingo, I don't know how you pronounce it, is selling stuff on the black market, and we're sending him to Afghanistan, and we want you to go with him, and we want you to report everything illegal that he does." And so our hero's like, okay, because if I don't, you're going to kill my family and I'll never get a job and all this stuff. And they're like, yeah, exactly. He's like, okay. So he never really reports the really, really bad stuff. He only reports like little silly stuff. But he feels like he's not really being who he really is, because he's reporting on his best friend.
Right, he's being a patsy.
Yeah. And so then after that's done, he gets sent to America to be a spy there. And he's given a woman partner who's been there before, doing this for years. And so now he really doesn't know who he is.
This sounds like The Americans, the TV show The Americans.
Yeah, it might be.
I love that show.
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
It's so good. Anyway, watch it.
Okay, I will. But the part in the book that I think it's really about, there's a line in it where he says, "I really look forward to being myself again." And I think that's what this book is really about. The story of his disappearance, which is the name of the book, isn't that the guy physically disappeared. It's who he is disappeared, because he had to be a spy on his friend, and now he's a spy for Russia and America and all that kind of stuff.
I get it.
Yeah. I normally don't get that stuff.
Neither do I.
But I got it this book.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's really
Anyway,
interesting.
But yeah, so there it is.
I always find it interesting too, when we're talking about fiction writers and historical fiction writers, what makes them interested in writing about the period that they write about. So he sounds like he's very into like post-Berlin Wall, Russian spies. I mean, in the 90s, I think, of course, after Cold War and all that sort of stuff, that was kind of like the, I don't know, haute du jour or something like that. But it's interesting. I wonder, because he, like you said, he was Welsh American, raised in England pretty much, and he writes about communist Russia and Nazis, and I wonder why.
And some of his books take place in Africa, and it's really interesting. And the mountain climbing one and all that kind of stuff.
I definitely have to look that one up, because I'm on like an Everest kick right now. So I'm ready.
Oh, yeah?
I think it's because it's so hot. I'm just reading anything about snow and winter and like just waiting for fall. I'm ready for fall.
Is it working for you? Is it cooling you down?
Well, pumpkin spice is here next week, so we're ready. I'm that person, guys. I am that person. All right. Anything else to say about your book, Terry or Paul?
Everybody should read it.
Okay. I'm going to read it because it sounds very interesting.
Excellent.
All right. So shifting gears a few years forward, I was reading in the 2000s. Let me just switch my view so we can see me. There we go. I was reading in the 2000s, and I read The White Tiger by, I'm going to butcher this, Aravinda Diga. His photo's here in the back. We'll give him a little picture. That's Aravind. And in case you couldn't tell by the author's name or by the lovely artwork on the cover, it is set in India. It was published in 2008, and it was entertaining. It was like darkly comedic. So the whole thing is written pretty much as like an epistolary format. So it's all letters, and specifically it's all emails actually from our main character, who is the White Tiger, to His Excellency Wen Jiabao. I'm terrible with Chinese names. His Excellency Wen Jiabao, the Premier Office of Beijing. And it's from an Indian man who's our main character, and he's writing to the premier of Beijing saying like, hey, I really admire you, I really admire the Chinese communist state, all this sort of stuff. And it's almost a Cinderella story of our main character. He tells the story of how he was born in a really rural and poor part of India, and how he kind of became a self-made man, and now he's a billionaire, and he now actually runs a taxi slash driver service for call center employees. So he starts out as this little poor boy in rural India who talks about how his whole family has to go work for the people who own the land. And of course, you can guess where, any money the family makes goes to the landlords and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And he actually rises above it to where when he's pulled out of school, he convinces his grandma to send him to a neighboring town in India so that he can learn to be a driver. Because after he's pulled out of school, he's working in a cafe, and he's listening to all these rickshaw drivers and all these cab drivers who are going through the area, and they're talking about like how they're making money. And for this little boy, he's like, oh, they're making money as driver, I want to learn how to drive. And also India, I think, has like one of the highest rates of like auto vehicle emissions. Definitely. So they have some of the highest driving rates, even though they have some of the most rural parts of the country or parts of the world. And so he goes to Delhi, and he becomes a driver for this family who's actually his landlord. And he starts driving them around. Things start happening. The guy he's driving for, his wife ends up leaving him. So now the main character, whose name is Bahram, is driving around just the husband, and he starts seeing the husband do things like bad things. Like there's women, there's drugs, there's drinking, there's illegal trade, all this sort of stuff. I mean, I hate to play into a stereotype, but seedy New Delhi, that's where he's driving, and that's what he's observing.
Yeah.
And so our main character realizes that the guy he's working for isn't trying to help Bahram, our main character. He's not trying to help the hero at all. So Bahram decides to kill his boss and steal his money.
Okay, then.
And spoiler alert, he does. And he's and he takes these, I think it was, I'm going to say $16 billion, but that is probably really false. So don't quote me on that. But it was a large sum of money.
Yes.
And he takes it, runs away, hides out for a little while, changes his name, and starts up his taxi service. And he starts off by writing his first email saying, I'm sitting underneath this really gaudy chandelier, and I'm writing you this, but don't worry, I grew up in a house with dirt floors, that sort of thing. So it's really funny. It's comedic. It's very irreverent, I would say. And it's definitely a conversation of the haves and have-nots, the self-made man. But something else that I was reading through the Goodreads reviews today were people were talking about dark India versus light India. And not in the sense of the color of skin, because of course you have like a degree of whiteness and westernization in Indian populations. But in the sense of rural traditional India being the dark India, kind of like the dark heart of Africa. Think about it that way. Versus light India, which is, it's a lot of what's portrayed in like Eat, Pray, Love, or the ashrams and like these yoga centers and like ecotourism and all that. That's light India. And so this book is a huge conversation between traditional practices, traditional beliefs, everybody going through like this very rural part of India, moving up through into New Delhi, and even though it's still seedy, moving forward into that sort of light India sense. And so there were a lot of Indians who read this book and they didn't like it, which I don't blame them, because I think it does play into a lot of stereotypes and a lot of stereotypical portrayals of these two different parts of India. I've never been. I want to go someday just because
Yeah.
I'm very interested in that culture.
Yep.
But a lot of people were saying that the author himself, he was born in India in 1974, but he was raised mostly in Australia. He then attended Columbia and Oxford, so he doesn't even speak with an Indian accent. He speaks with a British accent. And a lot of Indians reading the book were like, you don't get to talk about us like this.
Yeah.
So,
but it did win the Booker Prize.
It did, because it was
was his
good.
first book. Yeah.
It was, and it was good. I ultimately chose this book, so I won't lie. I originally tried to read The Girl in the Spider's Web, or The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
Oh, yeah.
And I couldn't get into it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I love that book.
I think I have to be in like the right kind of mood for espionage like that. It was very intellectual almost. But this book, it just kind of grabs you from the start, because he's kind of cussing and he doesn't have very fancy language that he's writing. And he's like, you know me, I know you. Let's just talk about this like friends sort of situation. But it was good and funny, and I'm glad I got to read it.
Cool.
Yeah. But it was also interesting because at the time, I think there were 3 big books that all came out like the early 2000s that were set in India. So you have White Tiger, which almost I don't think a lot of people have heard of. You have Life of Pi.
Yeah.
And then you have Slumdog Millionaire, because that was a book too to begin with.
Oh, yeah, right.
And then, of course, the movie. But they all kind of portray the same character, the self-made man. They go about it in completely different ways. We have a crime boss who kills his boss so he can steal his money.
Right.
Life of Pi, I mean, it's a happy ending. And he kind of like self-made man in the sense that he gets to where he's trying to go, and he survives living in the ocean with a tiger.
Right.
And then Slumdog Millionaire, he's a millionaire. Oh, I don't remember. Does he win his millions at the end?
I thought he did.
I feel like he does, but then there's a twist, and I don't remember the twist. But
I'm not sure.
They all came out around the same time, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Very interesting.
But it was good. I definitely recommend reading it.
Yeah, it is interesting how India was, for lack of a better word, modified by the British rule. You know, if the British had stayed out, who knows what they would have.
So the author actually talks about that, and I wish I could find the quote, because he even talks about the British in India, and I'm not going to find it in time, but it's like right off the top of the bat. And it was that, the British tried to make you their servants, but you never let them do that, talking about the Chinese. But we kind of did.
Yeah, a little bit.
Like, just a little bit. And it's just, there was a lot of stuff in here, a lot of cultural stuff that I hadn't even really thought about. That was just interesting to see from almost this single man's perspective. Of course, it's coming from the author, who is really more of a westernized Indian than anything else, but it was still.
Does he talk about the caste system at all?
In a sense, he calls it the rooster coop. And I don't think I can explain it very well, but from what I understand, the rooster coop, there are these certain men, the roosters, who are, they rule the coop. They rule everything. They are the ones large and in charge. And I'm listening to my rooster crow as I say this out in my backyard, so I'm laughing. And then everybody else is pretty much the hens or the roosters who aren't in charge.
Yeah.
So the caste system, he kind of compares like this farmyard system, which I thought was an interesting way of doing it, because I'd never heard of it that way before.
Yeah. I used to work with a guy who, his father was in the Foreign Service when he was growing up, so he spent time in India.
Yeah.
And then another guy who was from India joined the company. And so Edmund, the diplomat's son, takes out the Indian guy and teaches him how to drive. You know, here in America, you're driving on the other side, yada, yada, how do you drive? And the guy is totally disregarding everybody who's walking on the sidewalk, or they're in the Carousel Mall at Christmas time and there's a cop directing traffic. And Edmund's like, well, this guy's got to learn, so I'm just going to let him do what he's going to do. And he's just about to hit the cop, and Edmund yells, "Stop!" And the guy slams on the brake. And Edmund goes, "Didn't you see the guy?" "Yeah, but he's walking in the street, so I can hit him."
Oh my gosh.
He's obviously poor, so I can hit him. No, he's obviously a cop directing traffic.
That's
And you
just
can't
so
hit him. But that's really what this guy thought. And this was only 20 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, cars cost money, and if you have a car versus if you're
Exactly.
walking, I guess.
Yep,
And then
for a bike.
the main character in this, his dad was a rickshaw driver, and so he kind of grew up not quite the lowest of the low because his dad was a rickshaw driver and not a farm worker.
Right.
But still, it's just so interesting. Just how the automobile itself has changed culture and how it differs between each country. So I lived in England, and everybody's pretty respectful, except the bikes have like premier status in England. Like everybody gives way to bikes. Same in the Netherlands. The bikes have the right of way.
Okay.
But then I was driving with a German driver at one point, and they just ignored the stop signs. So I think it's Troop K Road. If you're going to Shoppingtown Mall and you're going over 481, there's like a stop sign, space, stop sign, and then you can go. They just ran through all of those. And they're like, in Germany, you don't have to stop if you don't want to. And I was like, well, here you do. So, and I've read, of course, other books like set in India, and they talk about Indian driving. And that's the one part I'm not looking forward to when I do travel there eventually.
Yeah.
But it was interesting getting back to the book. It was an eye-opener.
Sounds very interesting. I think I have that in my library at home. I'm going to have to take a look at it.
It's another quick read. It's only, for doing page count, 270 odd pages.
At least that's more of a novel size.
Yeah. So it's good. And like I said, it's all written in emails. So it's pretty quick. It's very like a conversational tone. So it's a quick read.
Yeah. Cool.
But
excellent.
All right.
All right. So what are we doing next time?
We're done.
We have finished.
We have finished.
Excellent.
I will do a little plug, however, if I may.
Plug away.
So Jen Tolley, who is the outreach librarian for Noble, and myself, I'm in the adult services librarian, in case you forgot, at North Syracuse. We are starting a romance webcast through the library because we are, of course, the romance librarians.
Yes, you are.
So twice a month, we are going to be doing a YouTube series where we talk about common tropes and issues related to the romance and chick lit women's literature genre. And we will also be doing book reviews based around those. So if people are interested in me telling dad jokes and Jen throwing pens at me, they should definitely check it out for sure.
I can see that happening.
Yeah, it happens a lot, actually.
Should be fun.
All right, but that's it this time. All right, thanks, Terry.
Thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye.